what is the most important tool a pro coder can have? What's that most vital resource? Now, say tools, what are you thinking about? IntelliJ IDEA? Maybe you're more of a Visual Studio Code person. What about Eclipse? These are all, tools. So is that the most important thing you can have, the IDE or integrated development environment that you have? Maybe. Maybe that is a valuable tool to have. Or maybe it's more about your battle station that you have. Is it your MacBook Pro fully leaded with all the cores, all the CPUs, maximum disk drive space? Maybe you have a powerhouse notebook or powerhouse Dell PC or something. Maybe it's not that. Now it can't be your monitor. You don't happen to have one of those 49-inch curved monitors that are known to be able to double as a boat anchor. Could it be one of those? I know somebody that has one as a YouTube content creator. I think the import taxes to get into his country were more than the cost of the device itself. No, it's not that. One of the most important tools you can have as a pro coder are the relationships that you build along the way, the people that you're going to help and assist and provide value to. Because in this world, the thing that's really of value to us is when we're able to work with other people and solve problems. Now, a simplistic way to be a pro coder, it means you're building apps, right? That's a tool to do what you're really doing, which is you're solving somebody else's problem. You're helping them fix stuff, get something working for them. I one time worked on an app. It was this Java-based app, and it did what was called invoice reconciliation. On that contract, we got monthly invoices, 300 invoices a month from different telco providers like AT&T, Sprint, Bell South, SBC. There's like 101 mom and pop shops you've never even heard of. And the thing is they'd have invoices coming in, and there was a team of about 4, 5, 6 people, and their job every day was to process the invoices, look for duplicate charges, remove redundant stuff or incorrect charges. And 300 invoices a month, they were working almost full time on this stuff. They'd have a batch come in, and it would take them a whole week to process, 8 invoices. But I'd worked on this app that after I inherited it and started working on it and applied a test-driven approach to it, I found out when I got it operational that I was the first person to get it operational. 6 other people had worked on it beforehand. And I was using test-driven tactics, automated testing, get the green check mark on the screen. That was really cool to me. I was using Java, some Spring stuff in it, all this kind of stuff. And while that was all really cool, what didn't dawn on me was that moment when I actually stopped by the break room at one point after we gotten it operational and been able to actually get it moving where these people were using it. I went to get a coffee and bumped into one of the people, and she had expressed how, she'd picked up 6 invoices that morning and with the app was done with them before lunchtime. So something that used to take her 1 to 2 weeks to get through took 3 hours. And when I could see the light in her eye, the excitement of being able to just get your job done because the tool does its job, then I would realize that's what I'm here for. I'm here to build tools for other people to get their stuff done. And that is one of the most memorable moments in my career. And the idea is when you go help other people and provide them value, it forms a professional relationship. And so if you can go out there and be building value for other people and build those relationships, it's not I'm going to help you so that you can help me. It doesn't work that way. That's transactional. There's not a lot to that because that's not sincere, and people can smell that. Can you sense it when somebody's coming and trying to help you just so that you'll help them? Yeah, you can sense that. Others can too. But when you wake up every day and say, let me see how I can help today. When people come to your office or reach out to you on Slack or Zoom or Teams or whatever, and you have an attitude of what can I do to help you? What can I do to provide assistance to this person? And you keep doing that each and every day, that builds relationships over time. It builds connectivity, connections. And there's times when you're going to say, I need help. I need assistance. And the people that you genuinely, sincerely helped over that time, they're going to remember that. They're going to say, what can I do for you? What can I do to help you out? And that's what's really of a beneficial thing, because that's something you can't shortchange. You can't go home and study a book and be caught up on that in 2 hours. You can't read through something and have that down in 2 weeks. It's something you have to commit to if you're going to be a pro coder. It's something you have to choose because that's something that takes years to develop. But if you invest that, if you apply yourself to solving other people's problems, it's going to build up a consortium of people ready to help you solve your problems. And that's what one of the most important tools of being a pro coder is. Now, today's episode of the Pro Coder Show is brought to you by 12 Rules for Pro Coders. This is something I started writing 12 months ago when I realized there's a lot more to coding than just writing software. It's not just writing algorithms and stuff. There's a lot more lessons to be learned. Everything from security to communications to testing, various ways that tactics that we learn through the thing. It's taken me 27 years to learn all these lessons, and I'm trying to write them into this book so that you can go grab a copy and you can have some actionable advice to accelerate your career. So you can head over to 12rules.io and grab a copy today. It's massively discounted right now because it's not quite done. The bulk of it's written. I need to send it out to an editor, but this is your chance to get in on the ground floor before the prices go up when it's released. So check it out. Now, in the next segment, the Meet a Pro Coder thing. I've invited a good friend of mine to come on board. And this is somebody who once worked as a Java developer advocate for the great and mighty Oracle, the purveyors of Java. He later joined the Pivotal Software team to become a Spring advocate. And we rubbed elbows from time to time. He even came to Nashville to speak at the Nashville Java user group. And we managed to sit there and chat for a good hour after the meeting was over. But he was lured away by a prime better offer and eventually joined Microsoft as a principal cloud advocate. Let us introduce Mark Heckler. How you doing, Mark? Welcome to the Pro Coder Show. How's it going?
Great. Happy to be here.
So you're a pro coder. You've been at this more than 1 or 2 years. How did you start? What was your starting point for becoming a pro, for becoming a software developer?
Boy, that's a great question because I think so many of us on this journey still feel like we're not there, and I think that's probably a healthy attitude to have is we're still, while we admit, yes, we know far more than we did, while we are pretty comfortable slinging code and working with various different tools throughout the entire tool chain, there's still so much more to learn. And the further we go down that path, the more we realize how much more there is to learn. But I think probably gosh, it's hard. I think probably the first time I really felt like I'd kind of come into my own was I worked for a small company years ago. Very small, founded by one fellow who grew it out into. It was still a fairly small, regional market type of company. But he turned me loose as the lead developer, and I think at that point I realized that there may be something to this. Maybe I have some more than a tiny-ish amount of talent in this area and drive and ambition to do better and refine and maybe get things done. So I think when you start out, you're still very focused on I'm a junior, I don't know anything about anything. And then once you get to a point, I think the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn, but at least you feel like you've got your footing. And that's where I feel like I kind of found mine.
Let me ask this. Are you like classically trained? Like, I didn't know if you went to university to learn your skill set or if you went down another path.
Yeah, I went to the university. Interestingly, I went for a degree in information technology, but at my university, there was a CS program, and it was a small enough programs, if you will, that there was a lot of cooperation between the two departments. So you had the IT, which was more in the business side, and you had comp sci, which of course into the sciences. But there were a lot of crossovers. There were a lot of times that many of us went to the other side of campus and did a lot of like bit twiddling and C and systems level stuff. And then there were conversely a lot of folks who went through the comp sci program who took some of the business type of or business focused courses. So it was really kind of a healthy environment, and I feel like probably there's more of that goes on anymore because there is a more a greater understanding. Just like between languages, there's a greater understanding that one language doesn't cover all the bases of everything you'll need to know and use throughout your career. So I think there's more of a willingness to learn and embrace good things you can pick up from other domains. So at least I hope so. I hope that's where we are now.
So you said IT. So you had to study some of that business stuff, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that
and interestingly, I don't want to go too far off on a bunny trail here, but most of us, regardless of our our focus or preferential focus, I guess you'd say, most of us don't work for a specifically research driven institution or a government institution. And even folks who do consulting for government are one step removed from that. So I even include them in the you're not really government type thing. But most of us work in some kind of an enterprise where things are tracked other than just research goals. So I think it's important to understand from it, like economics, just in general. You don't have to know everything about economic models and all this, but I think a lot of that is very useful for economics, finance, the marketing, the management course that you might pick up. Many of these things are very useful to understand sometimes why things are happening to your budget, to the goals that your organization has, why a particular feature set might be embraced over another that you're trying to implement when you might have a preference to develop the other one. Maybe something else is a higher priority. And sometimes if you don't have that broader understanding, some of that just feels really mystical. And it's not. So the more you understand holistically of everything that is happening around you versus just specifically what your task is, the more sometimes it doesn't make sense. I mean, to be clear, but at least you kind of understand why some of these decisions are unfolding, and it keeps you sane and keeps you able to happily focus on what you want to accomplish.
that kind of reminds me of one of the courses I got to take was towards I think it's my senior year at because I studied computer engineering. Is that we had to learn engineering economics, and we
Yes.
studied. That's where I learned that time value of money equation, and it's
Yes.
something that as I've gotten older and now I'm married, I have kids, and we're sitting there doing budget stuff. I'm like, where's that textbook? I got to dust off that formula because now I'm sitting there trying to think of, okay, wait a minute. I remembered how to do these calculations, and I actually found out how to install a financial calculator onto my phone. It's like I've got this HP 12C app on my phone, if I can do it without
Yes.
blaring,
Yes.
which has time value of money baked into it. And I watched scenarios where, okay, get your head out of engineering and think of economics because the company I initially worked for is like this 100-year-old company that had been through a lot of evolution. But when I started in the industry, we had paper time cards I had to sign, and
Wow.
they had migrated us to an online web form to fill those out every day, and we had it was like 8 clicks to get to that web page. Somebody sat down there. We would all bemoan that we used to have the cards sitting on our desk to fill out, and now 8 clicks to go to a page. Somebody sat down and counted the clicks, how long it took, multiplied it by the number of engineers in the division doing it, and
Yes.
took it to a vice president in dollar cents and said, we're spending X dollars a day filling out time cards. Well, within 2 weeks of them sharing it with the VP, they made it where it was 2 clicks to get there because somebody had sat down and thought in terms of money is like, do you really want to have this burn rate going for the entire division? And I think you made a good point on that with if you understand the economics of what's happened, sometimes you can be like, okay, now I get what that program manager's talking about.
Yeah, and it's funny
Um,
you mentioned that because that I completely forgotten about this, but several years ago I worked for a Fortune 100 company, and of course, the bigger the company, the more they love the meetings, right? And I have said for years, some meetings are absolutely essential. They're the fastest way to get to a consensus. They're irreplaceable, and then there are the vast majority of the rest of them. And our group, I guess you'd say, so is larger than our team, but anyway, we they loved meetings. The managers loved their meetings. So we spent so many hours a week in meetings. I tallied it up. I started like recording from the time that the meet, not just the time you'd walk into the conference rooms, but the time you would actually be stuck in the meetings. And it was 10 hours a day. And I just like took those numbers and figured them across our entire group, added them up, and showed it's like you if you're looking for a way to boost productivity, output, general happiness, all these metrics. This is an easy way to do it. We're losing over a day a week. Over 20% of our time was sitting in a conference room. And and I remember my boss, when I went to him, he's like, "This can't be right." I was like, "No, no, look. I mean, I actually have the times, starting times, ending times, and you count times five people or 15 people or whatever it was for that particular meeting. Do the math." And he's like, "Well, we're not going to be able to get rid of all meetings, but we could probably focus those." And of course, this was before the whole thing got to be that meeting should have an agenda. If it doesn't have an agenda and a set time period, it's an unproductive meeting. Again, I think most people agree that certain meetings are absolutely essential. And then there's the rest of them that devolve into the, "So what did you do over the weekend? Oh, wow, we should probably talk about this." And it just gets out of hand. So we wound up cutting that by over half.
Wow.
And people were happier, more work got done. I mean, everything was much, much better. But I'd completely forgotten about that too. You mentioned that. And
They need to
yeah, I
cut
mean, it
you.
all
They should
comes
have cut you a
down.
check. They should have cut you a bonus check for the amount of money you saved
I
right
was
now.
just happy
Okay.
to not be in meetings all the
Yeah,
time.
that's the real payoff. We had gotten this trouble ticketing tool. The idea is we were evaluating: do we buy the commercial standard everybody used for running the help desk at this op center, or do we use the free ticketing tool that came with an app we already bought? Well, I can tell you what they chose. You can guess what they chose. They chose the free one, and we had so many meetings of engineering workarounds for that system that I said, I think we've exceeded the cost savings, because I worked on that contract for 10 years before I actually left to join the spring team. And we had not gotten away from getting together, having meetings with 3 or 4 engineers, sitting there engineering a workaround for this and a workaround for that. I'm like, I think the number of hours worked workarounds are ridiculous.
Sunk cost fallacy
But
all over again.
so now, what's some of the so I'm sure you've had lots of different roles. Like, one thing that I was sharing with people at Austin P State University in the talk is that you're going to have different roles. There's not you're hired and here's the one thing that you're going to do. So there's going to be times when you're going to have fun stuff. The app I talked about in my opening monologue, that was a fun app. That was a little Java Swing application. It was just me and 6 people that used it. I was able to dedicate to doing test-driven development, lots of fun there. But then there's other times when I have slogged through backlogs of tickets and gone on a hunt to shut down tickets that are 10 years old that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the different, if you're sitting there trying to think about the different roles you had, what's something that you had to do that's like, well, this is kind of nitty gritty. It's not a blast, but something I got to do, for 4 weeks or something like that. Do you have some examples of some roles you've had like that?
I mean, nothing specifically as far as one instance, but I always kind of jokingly think about and refer to myself in this one role that I had several years ago. I was working for a consulting company, and I was, I guess, a bit of explanation is in order. I'm from a smaller town, and I think you grew up in a smaller town, Greg. Am I remembering that right? Many of us,
Yeah, I grew up in, well, it was a small town. Now it's become a huge town, but
yeah. But I mean,
uh,
most of us don't grow up in the heart of New York City or LA or San
right.
Fran. I mean, most of us grow up in the outskirts of something, right? So in smaller areas, I mean, you have parades. I'm not sure if they do, probably still do. I mean, if I went back to where I grew up, they probably have an annual parade or something, at least somewhere in the county. So we used to always kind of joke that there'd be your bands and your floats and your whatever else, and then if they have an element where they have horses, they'd always put the horses in the back because horses do things, when they're walking along, right? um so so there's always, in the parade, after the parade's done, the people have to go and try to clean up the streamers and the candy that, the floats throw out and stuff. Well, heck, I mean, think about Mardi Gras, so there's a lot of mess after the Mardi Gras parade goes through that has to be cleaned up. And of course, there are animals and horses and whatnot. And some of that is like, stuff that has to be cleaned up after the fact. I always kind of joke that at this one consulting company, I was the guy who sweeps up behind the horses because while I could go in and open up a new customer site or whatever, a lot of times what I did is customer retention and rescue. So if something had gone horribly, horribly wrong, kind of reminds me of your story starting off, that they'd handed you this system and it's like, fix this system. And you thought, okay, sure, I'll make some fixes to this and we'll get it out there and it'll be better. And you find out that, oh, it's actually never been deployed not for reals. And that was kind of my role too, because when projects would get vastly out of control, they'd be like, tap, tap, tap. Hey, Mark, can you go in and work with this customer? It's like, okay, sure. Who's the customer? What's the situation? And I would go in and rescue it. And those were, to borrow the line, those were the best of times. Those were the worst of times. But so many times, um, they really were horrible situations. You'd walk in and people would be standing at the front door with pitchforks almost, yeah, maybe not physically, but certainly virtually. And so many times when you did a great job, those were some of the most fulfilling things that you've ever
Mhm.
done, because they would just be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it could be this good. I remember one time that it was a very smallish thing, but but it was, I'm trying to remember the exact circumstances of it, but it was one of those things that they threw out and asked, they threw in an issue and a request. And I'm looking at it going, this is simple. Why hasn't this been done before now? So I issued the fix, and they were like, this is earth shattering. It's sort of the same thing. What used to take us hours takes us minutes. And you're thinking, why was this never done this way to begin with? This is crazy. So it does lead to some of those really scary moments and fond memories, I guess.
Yeah, something I can think of is like, I for 10 years on this contract I worked on, my primary job was I was the lead developer for this ops app, and it was what they used in the ops center, 24/7 by 365, must stay up. They'd call me in if it went down, that kind of, and if the database went down, it would manifest in my app. So they would call
Yes.
me.
Yes.
They didn't know to call the DBA. So I would come in at 2
Yes.
a.m. and then I'd call the DBA. Um, but and so we think about, oh, I don't want that kind of nasty stuff. I want the good stuff. And it's like, but that was sort of a crucible where I learned so much about. And some of the person who initially ran the ops center was somebody that had worked on the previous incumbent contract. So they sort of were an expert on who the customer was. They were not per se an engineer, they were an operations oriented person. And they actually finally picked one of the level 6 software engineers to take over the ops center. And this was a company that, until I heard him, they'd promoted this guy to level 6. I didn't know there was a level 6 at this company. This company with thousands of engineers, there's only like 2 level 6 engineers, software engineers in the whole company. They picked him. He had a totally different methodology. And so he was sort of a pseudo mentor to me, because he would say, let's make the software correct, then we'll make it bulletproof. So it was like, let's get it right, and then we can talk about how to keep it up at all times. So um, he would come in and he would be able to look at stuff and say, okay, we have tickets getting opened up too often. We're getting tickets opened up for frivolous situations and then closed. So he actually engaged with the customer and said, what can we alter the contract so that maybe we don't automatically open these tickets, and instead let's confirm the situation first and operationally, and then we'll open the ticket, and we can still hold the timestamp for what was the triggering event. So there's no loss to the customer on when the outage started, for example. And so
Right.
he had just a whole different paradigm, of more of an engineering paradigm brought to that. And, he was very successful at that. But it's that kind of crucible environment where you really learn stuff. So it's almost like I see in different places, it's like embrace the learning process. This is one of the ways that we learn stuff, is through trial and trial and error, more like trial and tribulation, right?
Yeah, I always, and gosh, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't want to get too far afield here, but this is one of the things that, I mean, I'm sure you have people asking your opinion every so often on in terms of, how do I grow my career? What should I focus on? I mean, all of us do once we've been around for a little while. And I always come back with, and I always kind of kind of caveat this. I believe firmly there's no learning that's bad learning. Doesn't mean you should, like, aimlessly take on whatever's thrown at you, because sometimes you look at things and you're like, wow, that's just, I don't even care. I don't want to learn that. That's terrible. It's a dead end, whatever. But you have to be very careful not to make those assessments haphazardly, because there are so many things that you might be tossed into, and hey, can you just clean up? You've done a lot, and I mean a lot of work with databases, and I have too, not as recently. But I mean, I was kind of a SQL wizard for a long time. I did a lot of relational work. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? But a lot of that was because I guess, one, I was willing. When somebody says, "Gosh, we just can't get this query working right," you're like, "Well, let me take a crack at this." and you dig in. And even, there was a time when relational databases, I don't remember timing because it's everything's fluid anyway. But there was there were a few years, and there were relational databases weren't cool. I mean, everything else, but NoSQL was hot. And now, of course, I think there's a broader acceptance within our community that every kind of data store has a lot of potential use cases that make a lot of sense, probably more sense for that particular kind of data store than maybe something else. So again, right tool for the right job, which makes sense. We're growing up, right? We're understanding this a little
Mm-hmm.
better now, versus like, oh, that looks shiny, let's chase that. And to some degree, our field will always be have an element of that. But for a while, it wasn't necessarily that cool to work on relational databases. But you learn so much about like you talk about
Mm-hmm.
relationships, but I'm talking about within the database itself.
Yep.
You learn so much about like uniqueness and relationships. I'm trying to kind of elevate this in my thinking, that apply across the board, even though the constructs differ. All this stuff it's very good learning to have. It's great to have that foundation. So I always tell people be willing to learn pretty much whatever. Doesn't mean you should have an unguided, undirected career path. But if somebody says, "Hey, would you take this on?" Chances are you're going to get something out of it that you can't even imagine right now. But a year from now,
Absolutely.
3 years from now, you'll look back and go, "Oh yeah, because I did this, I can do this, and it's so easy now." So,
Funny you say that. We do have a fistful of questions. Actually, we have both questions coming in the comments, and also
oh,
one thing is if you actually join the membership at member.procoder.io, my members got first dibs at submitting questions, and one of them asked, "What's the best method to keep up with learning new pro coding techniques? Like what are the tactics that you use to learn new stuff and to keep learning that stuff?"
do you want me to take a stab at that, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
go ahead. You take a stab at that.
Okay, well, it's tough for me because okay. I think most of the time when we come into this field, and I say we as far as everyone in this field, we are two things. One, we're naturally curious, and two, we're problem solvers. So I think that natural curiosity is something that you can like a fanning the small ember to become a flame and whatnot. It's something you can nurture and grow. And I kind of um, there's a line I love quoting movies and TV shows, as you well know, Greg. But there's a line, full of childlike wonder, and I honestly think that if we retain that wonder when something new comes out, it's not like we don't cast a skeptical eye at it. We critically evaluate things. I mean, hopefully, we're rational people, but on the other hand, we look at it and go, I wonder if there's a valid use case here for me that I can start pulling a thread and see what happens. And I think it's healthy to kick the tires on most things. Now, again, of course, I'll pick on JavaScript here, but as the joke goes, there's a new JavaScript framework released every day. Well, probably 10, but anyway, you can't possibly experiment with everything. But let's face it, if you learn about 3 new announcements every day of something, and I'm exaggerating because it's probably not quite that much. But if you learn 3 new announcements every day, there's going to be one of them you're like, I'd kind of like to check into that. So what I do is I keep a list of like an R&D list, things that I want to check into when I get a spare moment or a spare day or whatever. And of course, you don't get around to all of those, but you'll get around to some of those. So if you start picking some of those things out and kicking the tires on them and say, oh, okay, there may be valid use cases here, but it doesn't really do much for me, I'm going to just put that back on the shelf, and you move on to the next thing. And pretty soon you start finding a lot of things that, one, you think are cool. Two, you can see some great use cases for. And in of course, I do speaking as well. Obviously, you do too. But you kind of look at, if you pass something, the first 2 hurdles, this is something I'm interested in. This is something I can see a lot of use cases for. Then this would be really cool to share with others. And
Mhm.
that's when you go, wow, this is something I really want to tear into, like wholeheartedly jump into with both feet. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Some of the stuff that I've told people is, I would suggest is, how much does a book cost? I mean, what, $30 or something to go buy the paperback? It's not a lot. Go out and just buy a book. sometimes people are a little maybe you're a little stingy with the money, and it's like, well, I don't know, that's a lot of money. Well, you may be able to get your company to actually reimburse you, but think about, what did it cost me to pay for this tuition to go to college, or what did it cost me to go through a 12-week boot camp program? What's the cost there? Probably a lot more than $30. So think about, I'm going to go spend $30 on learning, Docker 101 or something like that, a technology specific thing that your team's using, or, introduction to React JS, call it what you will, just go spend that money and level up your skill set. And, consider this, if you're not willing to do it, is the person next to you on your team, they may be doing that. It's like, you could
Right?
sit there and by attrition, you can get passed by everybody if everyone's invested in that. And so instead of thinking of, well, what's the least amount I could spend on my career, think about, am I able to afford, what's the most I could afford putting in a year? Imagine buying 3 books in it every year. With taxes, maybe that adds up to $120 total. And it's like, what can that do for your career if you study 2 technology books and one timeless book? We talk about a timeless book. What about something like that? The Dragon book on compiler construction or something like that, or Domain Driven Design by Eric Evans. Or there's other books that are sort of have stood the test of time because they're conceptual and more philosophical.
Yeah, but
And
I mean, even if I hate to say this because again, I'm a history nut, and even things that haven't necessarily stood the test of time, they're fascinating. Like I read a book recently about the origins of the internet. Really doesn't do any good specifically to anything I'm doing, again, on a daily basis, but it's fascinating and it kind of gives you some insights into how this all evolved into where we are now. So, but I will say that to piggyback on what you've already said, one to kind of preface that, and then two to lean into that hard. The preface thing is I always tell people, look, if you just try to learn one thing a day, tiny thing, huge thing, doesn't matter. Just learn one thing a day. At the end of a year, you'll have learned 365 new things. Now, compared to the average person, how far ahead of that of them, and not trying to
mm-hmm.
pick on anybody else, but just the average across all of humanity, how much farther ahead are you than they are? Probably about 350 or 355 things new that you've learned over the average person. So what do you think that's going to do for your career? What do you think that's going to do for your enjoyment of life? You're going to be expanding your brain and loving life as a result of that. But coming back to what you said, it always troubles me a bit when somebody is, and I understand. I'm not trying to get down on anybody because all of us have varying feelings at different times. But when they say, well, my company won't send me to training or they won't buy a tech book for me, so I can't buy it. Oh my gosh, if you should be willing to invest in your own mind, your own
Mm-hmm.
career, and your own well-being. If my company would supply junk food to me all the time, would I only eat junk food because that's what's given to me? No, I would
Right.
look at it and go, well, okay, I like the occasional like dessert item, that's great, but I'm going to eat something healthy. I'm going to have a salad. I'm going to have a really
Mm-hmm.
nice, lean steak or whatever the case may be. But you're going to choose something that's better for you because you're invested in you more than anybody else could possibly be. So to think that you wouldn't buy a $30 book or a $50 book, and if you did that, like you said, 3 times a year, if you've dropped $150, yeah, maybe your company should have invested that. But if they don't, are you going to spite them by hurting yourself? I mean, don't do that.
Right.
You're investing yourself, and that will pay huge dividends. If for no other reason than you'll learn a lot of things that make you feel like, wow, okay, I get that now, and that makes you happier internally. So,
Well, I want to thank SEU James here. He posted, it may be analogous. We may have already effectively covered his question too. How would you advise someone to get better at developing? And part of it that is embrace the process. Get out there and
yeah,
tinker. I mean, the way I got started, my first exposure to computers I think it was it's probably before the age of 10. I got to go to this coding camp thing, and I learned about it's this programming language where you move the turtle around. You have these little,
logo.
logo. Yeah. It's just,
Yes,
by turtle, we mean triangle on the screen. This is on an Apple II, and you can
I'm a
turn
nerd.
it, move forward, pen up, pen down, and you learn how to draw squares and triangles and stuff. And I've gone back and looked at that you know, since I've had kids, I've gone back and looked at that more, and I was like, I didn't know the thing had recursion baked in. Like you can have functions calling itself, and it's like, so I was like starting to dig in. I was like, there's a rabbit hole here. This is kind of impressive. But it's kind of like go grab it and give it a spin. And
Yeah.
when do you do that is debatable, because I've seen people just debating, should you do these weekend hackathons? Should you go spend 8 hours on a Saturday? No, you shouldn't have to work on Saturdays. You should be able to have a healthy career, working 9 to 5. And I have this tension between the two, because
Mhm.
it's like there were times when I was single and I was much younger and healthier, more energetic, that I could go in and I could work extra shifts. I didn't make that a habit. On occasion, I would stay late, not every week. Not, I don't know. There's jokes about like the very early days of Apple. There were teams of people working 80 hours a week, and I don't know, and proud of it or something. And I was like, okay, I'm not advocating any of that, but you know, where's there time that you can invest in yourself? You know, you said, is it worth it to invest in yourself? What's a few extra hours on a Saturday invested in yourself once a month or every other month? Is that worth it, to, if that helps you
Yeah.
get better at developing, whether it's the toolkit you're working with or it's something totally different?
Well, I think, and you've mentioned this, and you've covered this really well, I think. But there's been an environment of excess. There's been an environment of abuse in a lot of cases, to where you have to be careful to not advocate. Pour your heart and soul into this. 80, 100 hours a week, and everything will go great. I mean, we've seen good examples, we've seen bad examples, but I kind of think about it. If you think about it in terms of like, the person who works a job that they know won't be there forever job. Let's say that they're working in, I'll just make up an example here, customer support. They're answering phones, and they're, working for the cable company and trying to retain customers or something. That's not something that they've decided they want to do for the rest of their life. So they go to evening nursing school. Again, just making up examples here. So that nursing school has nothing to do with their job, 40 hours a week, responding to phone calls for the cable company. And they're willing to do that. They're willing to invest in themselves in a different direction. So I think we have to be careful between, and neither Greg nor I are saying this, that you need to invest more hours toward your, like if you're in tech, to invest in tech, and that's, give away your time and all this. But by the same token, if you're willing to, branch out into nursing school or law school or whatever the case may be, to do something for yourself on the side, on the evenings or weekends or whenever you can squeeze in the time, there's really no difference in that. So that's an investment in yourself. That's not, like giving away more, to quote, to the man, as the old saying goes. It's just investing in yourself to learn something that maybe you want to learn.
hmm and at the same time, I've embraced being able to, like, okay, I'm happy to go read about this extra technology because I want to learn how to do this, not because this is going to earn me extra dollars necessarily at work.
Right.
I want to go learn this. And at the same time, on the flip side, I've given myself permission to say, okay, I just worked for 2 hours straight. I'm going to take a break and
Right.
go downstairs and flip on the TV and watch an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Or I'm
Yes.
going to go watch a video on YouTube. I'm going to go watch Captain Disillusion's latest video on YouTube or something like that. It's like, it's okay to sit there and stop saying, I'm taking a break. And
And something else you said made so much. I want to come back to that too, because you said get in and code, and there's a lot of value to be gained from reading and watching, and I mean that's how you pick up ideas. I mean, let's face it, and that's how you refine yourself. But it's important to bring that back and put it into use. And I always try to say, be willing to be bad, because no matter what you start doing, you're going to be bad at it. But be willing to be bad, but don't be willing
Mhm.
to remain bad. And by doing that, I'm going to start coding. Okay, this is horrible. It's terrible. I can't even get a simple one liner to compile. Oh, what the heck? Start somewhere. You got to start bad and then start working on that to refine and improve and grow. So, anyway.
Now we've got some more questions here that were sent through. There's also if you're, by the way, if you're enjoying this, hit the smash the like button. But you can also join the mailing list. Go to join.procoder.io and you get on the email list. And this is totally free. So I write content all the time. The members I talked about earlier, they get it first, but later on, I eventually share it with the people on the newsletter. And I tip them off, and we have some more questions from the people on the mailing list. One of them is from Mirko. He's a software developer. He works with Java, and he's been at it for about 8 years. And his question is how to make myself promoted to senior. Now it says I'm stuck at meteor position. I'm assuming that in his native language is probably like a junior position or whatever you call that. But he's like, how do I make myself promoted to senior? And I'm going to take an initial cut at this, and then I want to hear what your take is on this, Mark. Um, One of the things, the phenomena, and this is also covered in the book that you can go grab at 12rules.io. We talk about this process is there's this thing called a salary band. So this, like for a given position that you're at, maybe you're at a level 2 software engineer at your company, whatever they title list for that, but there's a range of salaries, the person making the least and the person that making the most. And this is called the salary band. And you're in there somewhere. You're stacked in there somewhere. And every year, depending on how they do stuff, you may get a raise or you may not, but wherever you're getting, you may be moving along. Well, I can tell you from an economic perspective, when you're below the midpoint, where it's in the middle, when you're below the midpoint, there's more pressure to move you up to move you up the salary band in a given year. But once you cross the midpoint, because you're becoming a bigger piece of the salary band, the pressure goes the other way. It pushes against you. There's less pressure to then move, because if they give you a merit increase when you're above the midpoint, it has more effect of moving the whole band along, and they don't want to do that. So when you're below the mid, so if you can go to your company and find out what's the salary band that I'm in, talk to your immediate supervisor and say, am I able to see the salary bands? Where am I in that? You can kind of, if you understand how it's working, you'll know what to do. And that's, while you're below the midpoint, the temptation is to get you pay raises. But once you get above the midpoint, the real trick is to try to get promoted, because what happens then is if you get promoted, they move you into a new salary band. They give you an increase in pay, but now you're going to be below the midpoint of level 2 engineer. It's kind of how it operates. And in order to get promoted, a lot of companies have standards and policies that they follow. For example, at my first position, I happened to get hired immediately at level 2, which made me still junior. But because I had gone to grad school and they were deficient on engineers, I happened to get hired with an instant promotion. But I could not get to level 3 before I had completed a minimum of 5 years at the company. They had a hard limit there. So I don't know what hard limits are at your company. There may be other standards, but that is, to get promoted, it's easier for them to make the case if you're above the midpoint to get you promoted, but you also need to act like what is that level 2 person doing? What are the responsibilities of a level 2 engineer? And this is something that's perfectly okay to chat about with your supervisor. And, the next time you have a one-on-one meeting, I don't know if you have them every month or every quarter, or at least I'm hoping it's once a year. It's okay to say, what do I need to be doing to make myself promotion material? And they should be able to discuss that with you. When I got promoted to level 3 way back when, long time ago, my manager came to me and said, one of your required duties is to participate in interviews. That's an assumed task you're going to do. And I read that loud and clear, and I jumped in and started doing interviews all the time. So I learned a lot about the interview process. But the idea is to make it where you're irresistible, because you're taking on the tasks and the responsibilities and the roles that are expected at the next level up. So it's almost like you're making it where they have to promote you. As one more example in all this, there's somebody that worked for me. I'd hired him as a new grad, and this person was incredible at at the roles. I kept giving them bigger and bigger tasks, and they would knock them out of the park. So I happened to be that person's immediate supervisor. So when I went to the annual meeting where they were trying to figure out how to divvy up the merit increases, I was able to walk in and put this person at the top of the list, and everybody in the department knew him. Everybody, it was a no-brainer to push them. The first year he moved past the midpoint in one fell swoop. The second year he moved to the top of the salary band. He was at the top at his second year, but because he was at level 1, it needed a minimum of 3 years to get to level 2. Well, the third year came around, and it was easy to write the promotion packet because he was carrying out lots of responsibilities of a level 2. He had eagerly taken on assignments. He had looked for opportunities to insert his skill set and all these things, so that it was easy for me as his supervisor to sell it to the department to promote this person, because otherwise they were going to have to, if they didn't promote him, if they didn't increase his pay enough, the risk is he would probably leave because he could probably find a better deal somewhere else. And so that's how that worked out. So it is, what are you doing to take on responsibilities and tasks to serve the team? What can I do to help the team, to help the growth here?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
I mean, that covers a lot of it really, really well. The only thing every company is so different that I always feel really weird when I toss out advice because, like you mentioned that there are certain hard minimums in terms of years. And to be honest with you, that personally would scare me away. I would run out the door quickly in most circumstances because there are going to be certain people who within a year's time are going to dominate their particular, and I don't say that in a bad way, I say that in a good way. They're going to be fielding the most issues. They're going to be fixing the most code. They're going to be refactoring, doing wonderful things, meeting the most user requirements. They're going to be the friendliest, the kindest, the most ambitious. They're going to be lifting the entire group or team or department on their shoulders happily to do it. And they'll be like, oh, sorry, you've got 2 more years before you can be promoted. Meanwhile, you've got some folks who are going to follow a more normal career path. So I always feel like stuff like that is crazy arbitrary. Now, there are some companies that are more traditional, that are more like regulated industries, things like that, that you'll see that a lot more. And I mean, you can rant against it, but it's just the way it is. But what I will say is that I've found that kind of a two-pronged approach. One is if you focus on what you're doing, what you're learning, what you're growing and gaining from the experience, then if the company rewards you and recognizes that, then great. That's awesome. If they don't, I mean, worst case, and I'm talking worst case, but you could walk away from that at some point and feel like, you've given them far superior value for what you've drawn from them, and you have taken away far superior value to what you brought in when you started. So the worst case scenario is not a losing proposition. But I do think if you focus more on that, while also, as you mentioned, sitting down with your manager and saying, look, I'm doing this, that, and the other, and I'm happy to do it. I'm not complaining about this at all. But is there anything I'm lacking in terms of consideration for promotion? And they might say, nope, you're pretty much doing everything. I'm going to put you up next month. Or they may say, well, it's kind of weird. It's kind of arbitrary, but our company in particular expects you to do this, that, and the other thing. And you say, great, thanks for letting me know. I'll start pushing some of my efforts toward that as well. So.
And if anything, I mean, I want to encourage people, build that relationship, that back and forth with your immediate supervisor, because everybody's a little different. There's people that are very proactive. I've had managers that have taken no prompting to reach out to me and give me feedback. And other times I've had to reach out and say, I need this feedback. And what is it? And you should be able to converse and be like, okay, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And don't put it in terms of right or wrong. It's what could I do that'd be more effective or more efficient, or where are ways that I can improve? Am I even focusing on the right priorities? What is the department assuming I'm supposed to be doing? Am I aligning myself with what the department's expecting of me? Just aligning expectations is a powerful tool. I do want to share the first question we got was from one of our valued members here, Don. So it was like, I'm like, of course I'm gonna put you into the show, Don. Thanks. We got another question from Maxime. He says he's more in the question. It asks, what are you? You a university student, boot camp enrollee, fledgling developer, or a veteran? Don, I just put up there as a veteran, but Maxime here is he's more than a fledgling developer on a team. I've noticed a decline in my skills outside of my long-term project. How can I stay current with new technologies and tools? And part of me is like, you were kind of saying that earlier, Mark, is maybe you need to find some time and just go and do something for you.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, again, you come back to if this were an entirely different domain, like law school, nursing school, whatever, you'd think nothing about doing something on the evening, but you don't necessarily want to go, well, gosh, all I do all day is code. And I go home and people are telling me, well, I should be coding then and coding on the weekends and coding when I'm sleeping. And no, it's not that. But if you feel like your skills are atrophying in an area that you want to explore, that tells me there's some interest or some recognition that you feel like these are important long term. So for instance, what I would do, and I can't say this is for everybody, but what I can say is it's worked really well for me is if I'm working on, something during the day, let's say, and I tend to probably blur the lines more than others. So I'm not necessarily advocating you follow my footsteps exactly, but find the balance that works for you. But if I'm working on something during the day that has nothing to do with something that I want to work on, learn, play around with, explore, what I'll do is I'll find some domain, something that interests me, and find a way to work that into it. So if there's some offbeat little repo on GitHub that hasn't been maintained in 3 years, but it's kind of cool, I think, and kind of fascinating to me, I might like I might fork that, or I might just pull down the code and start poking at it, or I might start trying to contribute to that. But there's no pressure. I mean, this is where you can have some fun. This is where you can go, well, my skills in Git have become a little weaker because I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a great justification for that, but I can't. But let's say that you do the same 5 commands over and over again. Well, I want to kind of work out from there, do some crazy stuff. Do some crazy stuff on your time just for exploratory reasons, because then you don't have to worry about making something inaccessible or bringing down production or something at your work, and know that the stakes are low and you can play and maybe explore areas that you would never get the chance to in a normal work environment. And you call the shots, like you said. If you want to,
Yep.
hey, it's Tuesday night, I'm really tired. I'm gonna order in pizza and sit down and watch a marathon of Deep Space Nine. Great, that's fine. And then
I'm
Wednesday, maybe,
there. No.
yeah, yeah, I'll text you the address. But maybe Wednesday you say, well, I want to kind of work down this path because I've never done this before and see what happens. Oh, it badly breaks. That's what happens. Okay, well, how do I fix it, or do I just burn it down and start over? Well, you can do that when the stakes are low. So find something that the stakes are low that interests you and play.
Yeah, I think one time I was so, if you didn't catch on, it's like I used to write Spring Java code. At least that was my day job up until about a week ago. But at a certain point in time, I was like, I am going to go dig into JavaScript, and I want to do that React JS that the buzz is about. It's one of the people on the team at the time had talked about React JS and the virtual DOM. And if you don't know what any of this hubbub is, you can go look it up. But I went and started tinkering with it on the side. Nothing due to be turned into the boss man. And I dug in. I was like, this is kind of cool. This is not the JavaScript I remember from way back when. And so,
And that's the fun of it when you can do that,
yeah.
because if you were waiting for something to be handed to you, and let's say they came to you and say, Greg, we really want you to do something with React to do this particular thing. And you think, oh, okay, now I get to finally play with React. Well, within certain boundaries, yes, because you're still having to answer the needs of the mission. But when it's on your time, I mean, you can go bananas with that. Well, I'm going to play it with this. And this is probably a weird thing that nobody will ever use, but I just think it looks fun. So I'm going to do that. And you can do that. And again, the stakes are zero. If you have a
Yep.
completely throwaway thing that nobody will ever want to use, who cares? It's something you use to learn something. So it's valuable in itself just for that.
I think that's a great lens to put it through. That, is this, if this isn't owed to anybody, then it's my terms. It's my deal. This is investment in me. There's a content creator over the past couple of years I've started following who has really had this drumbeat message of invest in yourself and,
Yes.
stuff that's just for your growth. And if you do enough of those things, I liked your example of, can you learn something new every day? If you take a financial calculator and say, I'm going to try to improve 0.1% a day, and go run a financial calculator and say, what if I do that once a week, 52 weeks out of the year? Go punch that into a financial calculator and see what kind of growth that does to you. And it's incredible.
I always think back of the one example about if somebody offered you, I don't remember what it is now, the specifics, but if somebody offered you $1 million today or a penny a day, doubling every
Mhm.
day, and you start to realize the power of compounding, and that how much more so with knowledge.
Mhm. I think that's a fantastic example. We've got another question from Patrick. Patrick's a university student and a junior developer. He says, do you think having a cybersecurity knowledge or a certificate or degree is useful for the future with the AI taking over? Well, no, right to it, right to the AI stuff. In my opinion, I think there's I don't know, I kind of think of that example of Spock saying in the original series was like, computers make valuable tools, but I do not wish to serve. And I think there's a lot of tools that are coming coming. They're here. Whether I leveraged Chat GPT on one of my last tasks I did on Spring Data JPA. I went into Chat GPT and I said, okay, are you familiar with the internals of Spring Data JPA? It said yes. I had no way to double check it, but it assured me it did. So I said, okay, let's try this. And I kind of did a back and forth of, okay, Spring Data JPA has these 6 different types of queries that end up putting you in a different corner of the code. And I said, can we come up with a unified interface that sort of implements all of them so we have a single flow? And with a little back and forth, it kind of gave me a sketched out idea, but then I picked up and I went and did the rest. So it kind of helped me noodle out the beginnings of an idea, like a foundation. And this is what I think these AI tools or LLMs, whatever you want to call them, can help us do. Or we can get to, like, I'm trying to answer this question. I can either try to use the Google search engine and find the right page and get to the right paragraph with the correct sentence, or sometimes if I just ask the Chat GPT for the answer, it can kind of, it's almost like it gleans what my question's about and it can distill the information and get me to an answer faster. But that's not the same thing as this AI tool is going to replace me and write all my code for me and make the business more money than I ever could. I'm not sure that that's what's coming, at least not what I've seen so far. Now, I guess that maybe I went off on a tangent a little bit, but it's, do you think having either having cybersecurity knowledge or a certificate or degree is useful for the future? We need that stuff. If you're studying that, that's fantastic. And something I've told people is, there's different arenas that we need people. We need people that build the web. We need people that can write HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And that's no tiny feat. There's a lot of people that are studying that. Like you said, there's a new JavaScript toolkit released every day or every week. It's kind of a joke. We need people that can write data queries. Are you good at quizzing databases? Security is this whole other beast. I know like little bits of it, but anytime I would talk to Rob Winch, I would realize I don't know much at all about the current state of the art. And if you want to get into security, it's a lot of investment in yourself, of studying, degrees, certifications. There's just a lot to learn to get to zero. And so I think all those things are useful skill sets. I don't think AI is going to replace security engineer at all. And what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to give too much away from a talk that I give on where AI fits in anything. AI is a super useful addition to the developers or the tech person in general's toolkit. So cybersecurity always going to be important. Security is always going to be of critical importance, and it's not going to be within the next year AI battling AI. So. And even when it does come to the point where everything is AI enabled, AI assist, AI driven, you have to remember that until artificial general intelligence is reached, and of course there are a million different definitions of that. I always think of I can't remember which president. I think it was like Truman or somebody, not terribly well known president, but the old joke about if you took all the economists and lined them up end to end, that all point in different directions. You always think with something like the statement like that, that reach around the world 3 times and say, no, they all point in different directions. And the same thing with the definitions of AGI. AGI, artificial general intelligence, does it become self-aware? Can it teach itself things? So on and so forth. What are the criteria? And out of, a million, well, let's say 1,000 or 100 different AI researchers and leaders, they're all going to probably have different, if not slightly, but certainly different takes on that. But we're not at AGI. We're at AI. We're at generative AI, which I guess you could say is GAI. I don't know. Anyway, generative AI. And I like to remind people of that, not to diminish what AI can do now, but to make people very aware of the scope of it. Generative AI is a generator. It generates things. Chat GPT, if you look at GPT, is generative pre-trained transformer. It takes tokens, and again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but it takes tokens and generates likely follow-ons, responses or extensions of that train of statements or tokens, if you will. So in many cases, and if you've tried even just a simple 3 or 4 queries / prompts with Chat GPT, for instance, you look at it and you go, wow, that's amazing. It's eerie how good it is, until the time it isn't. And that doesn't mean it
Yep.
suddenly got stupid. It just means that, it follows certain weightings, temperatures and again, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but it will generate this string of tokens, and tokens don't equal words, but again, for the purpose of our conversation today, let's keep it pretty high level. So it'll take a string of words and it'll say the natural words to follow this string of words is this, and with a few tweakings, it'll go down this particular path. And again, most of the time, that's incredibly brilliant. You look at that and you think, wow, that's amazing. And then there are a few times you're thinking, I remember I say early on, it's not been more than a year now, but a colleague of mine just typed into GPT, tell me more about Mark Heckler, or tell me more about Greg Turnquist, or whatever.
I remember
And
that.
and it came up with a lot of things that were right, and a lot of things like, I've never worked for General Electric. I think that's crazy,
Yep.
but there are, again, it does a really great job a lot of times, but not 100% of the time. Now, coming back like you did to what the original question is, should I study this because AI may take over the thing? Absolutely, study it. You're just going to make yourself more valuable. You're going to contribute better to the needs of our human race. That's a wonderful thing. The other thing, though, that I would caution is that while certifications and coursework and stuff, very important, the best part, whether the certification is one of the most respected in the industry or whether it's not valued, doesn't matter. The best part of studying for any certification is the knowledge you take away from that and how you can apply that later. So I always tell people, it's not like you don't want to pass a test to get that certification. I completely get that, but focus on what you're learning out of it. Learn the material. The outcome of the test will follow, but you'll walk away with so much more if you internalize it and make it meaningful to you. So anyway.
No, I think that's a splendid conclusion there. It's like, learn it for you. I think that's a great way to capture that. It's like, invest in yourself and not in brownie points or test certifications. I mean, it's a value to get that piece of paper from the institution you go to, but some shops, that piece of paper is vital. Other shops, they want to know what you know, and it varies widely where you go work at. So study for you. One thing I want to alert everybody to is, not only does this show stream live, but you can also catch it on with your favorite podcasting tool. Go to podcast.procoder.io, and when the show's over, I'm gonna pull it down and throw it up on Spotify and distribute it everywhere podcasts are found. So be sure to subscribe. And if you're already there, if you're listening to this on the replay, then go to your platform and give it a thumbs up or review. You really stepped in it earlier because you sit there and said the party's at your house. So Don's like, you've got it. He's going to be over. I'll be right over there, Mark.
We'll have to set up a stream time, like a binge evening or weekend or something.
I didn't know you've got homework now to do after the thing. It says, Don said, if you're developing a boot app and you ask the AI tool, what's the current version of Spring Boot, you may be surprised at the response. I think this may be,
I will try that today. Yeah.
I chuckled at the stuff. People once Chat GPT became mainstream, people were like, "Oh, look, here's all the videos I'm going to make, or I'm going to foil Chat GPT." And it's like, this is part of, well, you got to learn the facts so you can tell when Chat GPT is dead on or like so bad, so far off it's not even wrong.
Yeah, one of your comments, Khaled mentions that you need to embrace the tool, and apparently you didn't. Absolutely, you do need to embrace the tool, but that doesn't mean you don't need to play around. I always like to, and of course everybody knows by now, or hopefully knows by now, but if not, they'll learn that the more specific you are, the more you invest into crafting the prompt properly, providing, if assuming you have something like embeddings where you can actually supply some of your own data to act on. All these things are useful, but even when I have something I'm wanting to use, I start from the very generic. Tell me about, I can't even think of a good example. Tell me about, tell me about airplanes. How do I learn to fly or whatever? And it'll come back with this, and you look at it and go, okay, well, how can we refine that? How can we get into FAA circulars and airworthiness directives and things like that. So I typically start very general and drill in. But I do think it's valuable to do that because then, as you mentioned, you can see how things are improving. Same thing goes with test-driven development. Same thing goes with domain-driven design. You typically we'll start from one point and build from there. And I think that's a really good path to follow, as long as you don't stop along the way. You can take a pause, but don't stop. Constantly be refining, improving, and getting the most you can out of a tool. In this case, we're talking AI, but it applies to everything.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank Mark. I want to thank you for coming on the show here, and it's been a hoot to have you come on the what I like to call the season 2 debuts. We have pivoted this channel from Spring Boot Learning onto Pro Coder. So, if you in the future, for those viewing it, if you want your question to show up on the show, go to procoder.io/question. There's a form there you can fill out, and your question may be added in for the next episode. Meantime, don't forget to smash the like button and hit subscribe while you're there. Just go ahead and do that. And I want to thank everybody for coming today.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.